John here with Ripewave Audio with another AV processor to unbox, do an in-house review, and compare against its nearest competitors. And this time we're looking at processors around the $2,000 to $5,000 range, AV processors, so no amplifiers built in. But this one that we brought in is the Monoprice HTP-1. Now this has been out for a couple of years now, came out in 2020, and it has been on and off the availability on their website for the last year or so. It's now been available again around August. Hopefully that will stay on for a longer period now. Not quite sure what was the holdup on availability, but this unit, the HTP-1, now there's rumors that this could be replaced by an HTP-2 in the near future. And but let's get into this. First, we're going to go over what this HTP-1 is. This is a $4,000 16-channel AV processor. And when it came out, it was designed to undercut a lot of the other 16-channel processors, albeit Emotiva was already in this game at the lower price, particularly with their RMC-1L and XMC-2. But as far as Denon, Marantz, and others, they either weren't playing in the 16-channel arena, or they were priced higher, like the Arcam AV41 being over $5,000 at the time. Now those prices have dropped since then. Let's take a look at this, see how they compare, and get this thing unboxed. And we will have follow-up videos where we actually compare it to what we have in-house, the Emotiva RMC-1 and our Marantz Cinema 50, albeit that's a receiver. But for those who are looking to move into processors, you will know what you're getting if you were moving from a Cinema 50 up to this, and that is the design. So take a look at this. Now, what really struck me when I received this is how small the box is. This is the smallest AV processor or receiver that we've received. It's also the lightest one. And we believe it's probably among the lightest weight unit out there. This is the only AV processor that Monoprice makes as of right now. It's marketed under their Monolith sub-brand, and they don't make a receiver at this time. So this is their only processor, and we believe ATI may make this for them, but it is not something that they fully designed themselves. They used outside company, but what they produced, really checks a lot of boxes for people. Now this has a screen on here, a little more modern screen. It's not the two-line dot matrix, which we see still on a lot of AV processors and receivers. There's just a single wheel on the front here for your controls from the unit and a power button, and that's all you have. There's no earphone jack on this unit, and it's pretty simple. And when you look on the back of this, they are favoring digital interfaces. Now there's still 2 analog inputs, but that's just about it. Really favoring HDMI and coax and Toslink inputs. There is an AES EBU port on this, which we typically don't see on products except for Emotiva's RMC-1. We'll look at all those details in comparison in a second here. But yeah, fully balanced unit, all balanced outputs on this. It is DTS:X Auro 3D capable. Now looking inside of this, we can start to see really why this is as light as it is. There's not a lot in here. The depth on this is pretty shallow. And in fact, if you compare it against something like an Emotiva Basics MC1, their $1,100 unit, which is pretty Spartan inside, it's even not as deep as that. So this is how shallow of unit this is. If I turn this on the side here, you can get a sense. This is in the box. And I thought I was getting some accessories in here, and I did read on the label here, this is indeed the HTP-1 on the label. Now let's take a look at what this is providing for speaker layouts and for format supports against its peers in the $2,000 to $5,000 range here. Now I did leave Rotel out of this mix. I'm not quite sure if Rotel is discontinuing the models. Things have disappeared from their website. Some retailers still show those products there, but I'm not including it. That was one thing I did leave out in this price range. The most expensive peer in here is still the Arcam AV41. Now, this was about $1,000 more when we first looked at that unit, even in its AV40 format. But they've since dropped it down to $4,200, I think, to be more competitive against the Anthem AVM 78K, which is $4,000. This Monoprice HTP-1, $4,000. The RMC-1, that too used to be around $5,000, now at $3,750. The RMC-1L at $3,200, which is pretty much the same as the RMC-1, less expandable, capable features on that. So a lot of you have gone to the 1L because as far as expansion, you just have a phono board and some balanced inputs as of today. The Marantz AV7706 fits in this price range. The AV10 doesn't. I mean, that's $7,000. But this is an older unit from 2020, came out about the same time as the HTP-1. And I've also included the XMC-2 from Emotiva, which is the lowest cost unit in this grouping at $2,500. Now, all of these pretty much deliver 16 channels of processing, except for the Anthem, who gives you one more, and I think that's actually a pretty good count, 17. We'll explain that in a bit. And the Marantz AV7706, which is only a 13-channel processor. So I think Marantz tends to be a little more on the pricey side. To get the same amount of channels, you'd have to move up to something like the Marantz 8805, which is now increased in price to about $5,500, placing it outside this grouping. So you're left with this 7706, which has a lower channel count. So here we have it. Now, looking at the HTP-1 first, you get a pretty flexible in here. In fact, it's the only one in this grouping that lets you configure up to 5 independently controllable subwoofers. And of course, that comes at a cost because you are limited to 16 channels. You got to take that away from somewhere. So that's typically like in the heights. So if you want to do front wides, that would be a 9.5.2. If you wanted to do not front wides, that would be a 7.5.4. But if you only had one subwoofer, you could do a 9.1.6 with the HTP-1. Now, the Anthem is kind of nice, is it will let you do 2 independent subwoofers and still give you front wides and 3 rows of heights for a 9.2.6 configuration. So there's no compromises. And if you want to have more subwoofers, of course, they have the AVM 90 8K, but that takes you up out of this price range. The Arcam, again, can do a lot of subwoofers, and here you could have a 7.4.4 configuration or a 9.1.6. So again, very similar layouts, albeit different trade-offs depending on which your model you are. Some you're giving up a row of heights for a row of front wides. Others you're giving up subwoofers. The Emotiva RMC-1, you know, that configuration, you can do more subwoofers like a 9.3.4, or if you want to do more rows of heights, you'd give up on subwoofers and you have a 9.1.6 configuration. Same with the 1L and the XMC-2, all basically the same layouts. Now, Marantz, with its 13-channel limit, gives you a 5.2.5 configuration to a 7.2.4 configuration. So I really like the options that come with the HTP-1. It's even, I think, a little more flexible than the Emotivas that are very comparable. I think really the HTP-1 was almost designed as a RMC-1 killer, because at the time, RMC-1 had been out for a couple of years. A lot of bugs and defects that were giving it negative press out here. And here they could come out of the gates and hopefully have something that was more stable and check a few more boxes than Emotiva did. At a pretty good price, and kind of sitting at the time where the RMC-1L was playing at that time of release. The HTP-1, as we said before, doesn't have a earphone jack. All these other ones do have an earphone jack, whether it be 1/4 or 1/8 inch. I prefer 1/4 inch headphone jacks on that. But let's take a look at the formats. All of them sport Dolby Atmos and DTS:X, which is sort of par for the course nowadays at any level almost. There are a few models that support Aural 3D, and this is one of them. But it doesn't support a voice of God channel like the AV7706. But the Arcam, which is the other brand that does support Aural 3D in this mix, they don't support the voice of God either. So if you want voice of God, the Marantz 7706 in this grouping is really the only choice you have. But then you have less channels, so it becomes a compromise there. It does not have an AM/FM tuner. That's the only one other than the Anthem processor that doesn't. They all have removable IEC power cords. They all support global power ratings, but in case of Anthem and Marantz, you've got to buy the one that fits your power for your country, versus the Arcam has a switch, and the Monoprice and the Emotiva are auto switching on the power up all the way from 110 to 220. So good option there. IMAX Enhance support is spotty, and HTP-1 is one that doesn't have IMAX Enhance, and neither does Emotiva, but the Marantz does, as well as Anthem and Arcam. Dolby Vision is supported by all of these. Now, all of these support Dirac Live, except for the Marantz 7706, which is an Odyssey-based product. Now, Marantz has been going to support Dirac now, but it's only available on the Cinema 40 and the 50 and the AV10, and you have to pay extra for it. The Anthem, they always use their own Arc Genesis Anthem room correction method for calibration. And so those are the two exceptions, the Anthem and the Marantz. All of them support Dirac Live. But Monoprice is one of two brands, the other being Arcam, that has the multi-bass bass control. Either, well, they could do single or multi. You pay $350 more for single and $500 more for multi-bass control. So of these that have Dirac, they're the only ones that have the option to get the multi-bass or single bass control. None of these have THX certification. Now, when it comes to chips, and this has been a little hard to follow because over the last few years, people have been changing out chips because of AKM fires and availability and so forth. Anthem was one that switched from AKM to ESS, and they have now the 9038Q2M chips in there. Arcam is using ESS. They have been for a while. The 9026 Pro. Monoprice is using an AKM 4493EQ versus Emotiva has an AKM 4490. Now it's rumored with the new Plus version of the RMC-1 range, they're going to move to a new chip, and I believe it's going to be Texas Instruments. So that will change with their Plus unit. But for now, the current family has the AKM 4490, and the Marantz AV7706, I believe, is still AKM 4458. Of course, correct me if I didn't get any of these right. Now, on paper, the Arcam with the AV41 has some of the best specs out there for as far as their DACs, but Monoprice is rating their measured output from their processor higher than anybody that do publish. at 116 decibels and a THD of negative 106. But they're not telling me what they're doing as far as PCM conversion. We'll assume it's 24-bit, but is it 192 or higher for PCM decoding? And I can't find any information on whether they support DSD, Super Audio CDs. Of course, we'll test that out. We've got the unit here. We'll be able to report on how it handles our DSD or not. But the Anthem was not able to do. We had the AVM78K in-house. That didn't support DSD. And we do have an Arcam AV41 on order. There's a little delay, a little back order on the parts. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, we can have both of these in-house at the same time and check to see if it has DSD support, but their website has no indication, nor does its manual. Manual's horrible from Harman products. But Emotiva has DSD 256 support and Marantz DSD 128. So the specs are less. So it will be really interesting on our listening tests. On paper, this should really sound as good or better than the RMC-1. But we'll wait and see. You know, the ears don't lie. As far as the I/O, respectable count on the HDMI for the HTP-1, 8 in, 2 out, which matches Emotiva. Everything else comes with 7 in, 3 out. A little different balance there. It gives you 3 coax and 3 Toslink, which is 1 less in each category than Emotiva delivers. And the Arcam is 4 and 2, and the Anthem is 2 and 3, and Marantz comes in with the least at 2 and 2 for digital inputs. It has, as I said, an AES EBU port. This is something we see on Emotiva in this grouping only, as well as the Monoprice HTP-1. Now, these, we already talked about its channel count, so the multi-channel output is really what we talked about, either 16 or 17, unless you're Marantz, it's 13. Some of these models give you RCA outputs as well, like Arcam and Anthem, so you have a choice of balanced or unbalanced, as well as the Marantz. But Emotiva and Monoprice say, no, it's balanced outputs only. So that's not a big deal because you can use a XLR to RCA cable and it will work just fine. Analog inputs, as we said, this doesn't have many, only 2. It has the least amount of analog inputs of this grouping. The Arcam AV41 has the most at 6, and everybody else comes in between here. Now, it does have a downmix RCA output, and where it's labeled as that, as a line output. Others have a zone output, specifically called a zone output on them. The only ones to support component and composite video is the AV7706, the only one with legacy video. And the 2 models that have a phono on board is the AVM70 and the Marantz 7706. The RMC-1, you can optionally buy a board that goes into it, but all of them, you have to go with an external phono preamp if that's something you need. Looking into the HDMI a little deeper, now the Monoprice HTP-1 is like Emotiva in the regards that it's only 4K at the moment. With the Plus models, Emotiva is said to be going to HDMI 2.1, but they don't have it yet. Everybody else has upgraded. So the Arcam AV40 was the 4K version. The 41 has 8K. Of course, the AVM70 with now the 8K gave you the 8K. And the 7706 had some flaws in it. Then after a certain date, they had a new board that fixed flaws, but it's only one 8K input. The other models that support 8K are doing it on all the inputs now, as well as the new Marantzes. So this older Marantz only gives you 8K on one video input. Now, we often don't get details for the units that do support HDMI 2.1 and whether they're supporting some of the features like variable refresh rate and quick media switching and auto low latency mode. And we can say that's true for the Anthem and the Marantz, but for the Arcam, there's no published data to support. So if you know that, let me know. That would be great. Now on the Monoprice, it does still have an eARC port, one out there, even though it's 4K. So there's that one HDMI 2.1 feature, but they're not talking about what HDR formats that they are able to pass through, hybrid log gamma, HDR, HDR10, 10 plus, they're not saying. So again, missing data on that. They all support Dolby Vision, as we said before, and IMAX Enhance is only on Arcam, Anthem, and Marantz. Another unique feature that, because this is a 2.0B HDMI, it is supporting HDCP, the copy protection 2.3, which is the latest standard, versus the Emotivas are only 2.2. They're sticking to what was available at this time of HDMI 2.0. They all have an Ethernet port, be it certain models don't do much with that Ethernet port. Emotiva only uses it for their direct live connection, for example. Will be interesting to see how much we're able to do. Is there a web page available for the Monoprice? I believe there is. And it does have wireless capability, Wi-Fi, as well as it has a Bluetooth receiver, but not a transmitter. Now, I don't know what Bluetooth codecs it supports. You know, for example, the Marantz codec, it only supports SBC, which is the lowest quality codec that's out there. It's the least common denominator. So that's not much to brag about, but it does also transmit out to Bluetooth headphones and things like that, where none of these other units do. Like the Anthem and Arcam also has a receiver, but not a transmitter. But no Bluetooth in the Emotiva whatsoever, or any wireless that for that matter. As far as control, and they did add Alexa support to this. The only other one that has voice control is Marantz, and they support it extensively. Protocol control on all of these with infrared and so forth. Now, some of these products do have a DB9 serial connection. This is not one of them. Triggers, it has 4 triggers, which is something we like to see. Emotiva matches that. The rest of them have less. They're not claiming any real support for integration. Not to say that it can't be integrated, it's just not formally advertised as supporting, like Anthem supports a lot, and so does Marantz. As far as streaming ecosystems, they only talk about Roon Ready. And of course, Marantz does as well. The Anthem has been talking about Roon support for a few years now, but it still says planned, the last I looked. So I might need to check back with it. It's been about 6 months since I looked. So hopefully they're starting to add what they promised a couple years ago. But that's it. You know, a few of these do support things like AirPlay and Chromecast and Spotify, but it's spotty on the supportive ecosystems. Marantz has their HEOS, and we have that running here. As far as supporting internet streaming directly, now Marantz gets it all from their HEOS, and they do well with that. Not a lot of advertised support. Of course, if you have your phone connected through Bluetooth and it's talking to these services, you get it kind of that way, but it's not the same as having a native support. Now let's look at the remotes here. I don't believe there's a backlight support on the HTP-1. Emotiva, no backlight, although I've heard it might be coming with their Plus models. We did see that on some of the new Basics models that they have now a backlight remote for those. But I understand the Arcam and the Anthem and the Marantz all have a backlight capability of some sort. As far as physical dimensions and weights and all this, I said this was the lightest. I looked it up, 18 pounds, 8.2 kilograms comes in at the lightest of this group. The heaviest is the RMC-1 that we have, which is 24 pounds, 10.9 kilograms, but it's in a much bigger chassis than the other. To take those expansion boards, for example. As far as where these are made, the Arcam, the Anthem, and the Marantz are all made in Vietnam. The Monoprice and Emotiva are made in USA. Now I understand with internationally sourced components is usually the tagline, but they assemble these all in the US. The warranty on these are mostly 5 years, but the Marantz, they're not doing 5-year unless it's on their really reference series products like the AV10. They'll get a 5-year warranty, but this is only 3, and the Anthem is only 3-year warranty there. So that is kind of the overview of how this compares with its peers between $2,000 and $5,000. Let's get this open. Let's see what's inside and take a look for the first time. I get a lot of people writing in to this channel saying this is good. I did have one report in recently that was disappointed with the DACs that are built into this. Again, on paper, the DAC should be pretty good. All right. But again, it comes down to listening. And this gentleman was disappointed. And you got to believe, hey, I'm not going to dispute what anybody else is hearing. If you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. What I'm doing to help this guy out is he's considering the Arcam AV41. Now, I was trying to get this in exact same time, only to find my order was delayed a few weeks because of stocking issues. Hopefully, we can overlap some of the time we have this, and I can do a side-by-side comparison, and that would really help him out, and it'll help us too out and the rest of us in the channel. So we have an IEC power cord. We have at least one antenna. We have the remote, and I think the batteries just fell on the floor. We'll take this out of the bag. We will have to take off the protected film. So there is the remote. I mean, I don't see a button that says backlight, but some of these I've been burned before, don't have a button, but can sense motion, and then they start to light up the buttons. So we'll take a look at that. We get a card in here thanking us for our order with some extra information. All right, this confirms something for me, this sheet. Amplifier Technologies Incorporated. This seals the deal. This is made by ATI, a great company. They make great amplifiers, so they make this. And we know that ATI has their production facilities, I believe it's in California, and they make all their amplifiers there in-house. That's what they believe in. So this is probably no different. This is why this thing's built in the USA, and it's built by ATI. Good to hear that. Let's get this thing out. We've got, turn this around to a face shoe here. It's got some foam ends. We'll take those off. This isn't in any cloth bag, as we've seen. I think the RMC-1 was in a nice cloth bag. When you buy the higher end Marantzes, they're in a nicer packaging than the lower end models. Marantz seems to be packaged up a little nicer than Denon. At the end of the day, it's how these things sound. I do like something that looks quality, that feels quality, has you, it kind of adds to the experience, the way the knobs feel and everything. We'll see how this one fares. I mean, this is so light, it almost feels like a high quality, ultra high definition Blu-ray player than a processor. But here it is. And I'll screw the antenna on the back here. And here's the knob. All right, it's not rubbing on anything like the Yamaha did. But it's not heavy. Let's plug it in to give it a give it a go and take a look at its light, and we'll wrap it up from here after that. And before I plug it, I'm going to turn this around. And you can see here, here's all your HDMI ports. You have a USB in, your Ethernet, another USB. So this is for USB audio. This is probably for upgrading. AES EBU port, your digital inputs, your analog inputs, all your balanced outputs. As we said, this thing has nothing but balanced outputs. And then a power switch. Looks like a reset button for the fuse. So like I said, I'm going to flip this around. I didn't see any fans in that interior shot of this. We will hear them if they're present and they come on. If it has a fan and you don't hear it when it comes on, is there really a fan? Some of them I could really hear, like the Anthem. Annoyingly loud on the Anthem AV. Now this is interesting. It has a ground on the back here, I noticed too, yet it doesn't have a phono input. We noticed that a lot with the ATI amplifiers as well, with a ground on it. So that's an interesting thing. So this is just powering up. It says monolith. I don't see any ATI branding on the unit itself, although that sleeve in there, that paper that comes in is very telling. And so when this is booting up here, we get the monolith logo, and I think it's probably going through some sort of boot sequence. Oh, I didn't hit the power on button. This is just putting the power switch on the back of it with live power on it, but I haven't turned it on. And now the monolith has gone away. And it says almost ready. So we'll go into this in future videos here and find out, how it does its firmware upgrade. Is it able to take it over the Ethernet, or do I have to put a USB stick or some other method to get this thing upgraded to the latest firmware? That will be interesting. This looks like it's turned on by itself. It's showing its screen. A lot nicer screen than we've seen on other things like the Yamaha. We're very disappointed on that screen. We'll get into this more, and I can see here the volume going up and down with the wheel. So what are your thoughts about the HTP-1 with this just kind of overview against its peers, an unboxing? Are you excited to hear the next video where we'll get into the comparisons a little deeper? We start to plug this in, set it up, and how does this DIRAC experience compare against other models like our Emotiva and like the Marantz? That feedback would be useful to the Ripewave audio community. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to take your involvement in this channel a little further, we have our Patreon channel at www.patreon.com/Ripewave. And we've now got 3 membership tiers. Trying to get more active, get people involved about what content we should do next, let you know weekly what we're doing, and hear from you and provide our database and our slides to our premium members there. But also, you can hit that one-time thanks button. That one-time donation is always appreciated, but you can always hit that bell icon so you will be notified when the next video is published. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.